You set boundaries, the client agrees, and then halfway through the project, things start slipping. Suddenly, you're over-delivering or renegotiating what you thought was set from day one. Sound familiar? If so, hit like now. Hi, I'm Kiff, your friendly legal eagle behind the artist JD. Today, I'll explain why boundaries fail mid-project and how your contract can predetermine outcomes so you don't renegotiate under stress. The truth is, if something keeps happening, you need a process for managing it. When clients come to me, I spend more time asking what's not working about their contract and their process than what is working. I want to know where hiccups regularly happen and what is frustrating them about their work with clients. And that's because most contracts are focused on what happens at the beginning, but trouble shows up in the middle. So I write contracts to predetermine outcomes when common hiccups occur. If something is predictable, you can plan for it. So we want to include things like revision limits, feedback timelines, and a rebooking policy. For example, your project includes 2 rounds of revisions. Additional revisions will be billed at the hourly rate of $150 an hour. So, if the client says, oh wait, we have one more tweak, after you've already done those 2 rounds of revisions, you could just send a simple email to say, happy to make that change. Just a reminder, you've already used your 2 rounds of revisions, so I'll make that little tweak at $150 an hour. You're not doing extra work. It's a predictable thing that comes up. Clients just want one last tweak. Clients just want one more thing. Oh, what about this? We forgot to ask you about this. Or, oh, we ran this past this other person who wasn't supposed to be a decision maker, and all of a sudden they got all this input on the project. We all know those kinds of things happen. So we're going to predetermine how we're going to gracefully and kindly handle that situation so you're not over-delivering, so your schedule doesn't suffer, so your cash flow isn't impacted because they were unable to follow the process you already laid out. Another way you could write this is, if no feedback is received within 5 days, then the most recent version will be considered approved. So you can move on to the next phase of the project because they didn't provide any feedback. Or any requests outside the original scope will be billed at $150 an hour and will require a new timeline. So maybe you only set aside the time for this client for a smaller project. And then once you get working, you both realize they need a much bigger scope of work. And so this clause handles that and says the original end date can't hold the same, and we're going to have to renegotiate and replan the timeline because we're adding in these pieces that we didn't originally plan for. So, just like I do with my clients, I want you to sit down and think about your process. Think about what portions of your contract you don't enforce because they don't match your working style. I want you to think about those common hiccups that occur in different kinds of projects and what the predetermined outcome could and should be in those situations. I want you to think about what frustrates you with your work with your clients. What questions do you get over and over and over again? What problems seem to always crop up? And what we could maybe put in place a step before that becomes a frustration so that we don't end up in that frustrated place with our clients. So I want you to sit down and think about those things and then come up with clauses that are going to handle those situations. If the problem is all of these little quick questions after you've done the scope of work, then your language is going to be that you have 2 revisions and additional revisions are going to be at this rate. If you want ready-to-made language for when this kind of situation comes up, make sure you join us for Copy Paste Legal Week because I'm going to give you the exact email scripts you can use to send to your clients when things get off track. Or if one of those common hiccups and common problems and common frustrations is that you send them the deliverable, they're supposed to give you feedback and they ghost or take multiple weeks to get back to you, then you're going to want to insert a clause like we talked about before that says approval is assumed after so many days so that you can move on, you can go to the next step. If it is one of those situations where it's really common in projects for you to start and the client not to realize the actual scope of work that they need, then you're going to want a clause like any new requests are going to require additional payment and a new timeline. Then finally, remember we've talked about a few times in this video series about how that cover page of your contract can really be your best friend in these situations. It can put those things that are important to keep the project moving forward up front and center and not hidden in the legal jargon so that it's easy for your client to find that information and you're less likely to have to hold those firm boundaries because the client already knows about them. You're not reminding them mid-project because they're able to see it up front. If you've ever had to remind a client of a contract clause or a boundary mid-project, drop firm in the comments. I can't wait to hear what your situations are so I can help you create a strategy for them. In the final video of this series, we're going to put everything together and look at how you're going to stop duct taping fixes together in your contract and finally create a contract that matches your working style. Watch that video now.